Let's see. Here we go.
I have to wait through it. It won't let me move. Give it a couple more seconds. There we go. Good morning. I'm Dr. Sunanda Corrado, co-hosting the John Telford Detroit Show with Dr. John Telford, coming to you live at 10 o'clock every Wednesday morning on WJZZ Cool TV, streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Dr. John Telford is a former Detroit Public School superintendent, a former world-class athlete and conqueror of Olympic champions, a championship track coach, poet, newspaper columnist, longtime civil rights crusader, and the author of 6 Detroit-oriented books. The Poet Emperor of Earth, What Old Men Know, Creative Insubordination, The Will Robinson Story, The Poetic Pantsings of Mad John, his explosive autobiography, A Life on the Run, and another forthcoming poetry book, Athletes, Activism, and Apple Vows, a Detroit poetic epic. He also has a show on WCHB AM 1340, Detroit's gospel station, Saturday mornings at 9:30 and Monday evenings at 6:30. That's Saturday mornings at 9:30 and Monday evenings at 6:30. His books are available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, or just by calling The Good Doctor at 313-460-8272. That's 313-460-8272. Dr. John Telford has been called a legend and a lightning rod for controversy. He has received the Detroit City Council Spirit of Detroit Award and the Joe Louis Foundation Spirit of the Champ Award. He was named Wayne State University's Alumnus of the Year in 2001, and a Detroit track was named for him. His email address is drjohntelfordedd@aol.com. That's drjohntelfordedd@aol.com. Now, without further ado, I present to you that crusading old native Detroiter, Dr. Don Telford.
Thank you, Dr. Sunanda Corrado, that PhD from Columbia University, who is an anthropologist by training. Dr. Corrado has been teaching at Wayne County Community College District for over 10 years, and she is currently a researcher for the Detroit Equity Action Lab, which is housed in the Wayne State University Law School, and she is founder and CEO of Education by Design.
And my husband just corrected me last night. I've been teaching for almost 15 years.
Oh wow! Well, I've got to remember that then.
Yeah, young
Okay,
people
almost-
keep your circulation going.
Yeah, well that's why you look 20 instead of 15.
Oh shucks.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Detroit. I'm a blue-collar town. Blue salt melts my mid-March snow. Speedy cars and sprinters spring from me. I father fierce fighters and funky music. In a Motown moment, I can spit the blues right back in a bureaucrat's eye. Have you never seen blue salt? No complex chemistry here. Only the old color of a new sky. And there's a new sky dawning over Detroit today because we have Tracy Peters, attorney Tracy Peters, teacher Tracy Peters, knowledgeable Tracy Peters, sitting in the studio right across from me today, sitting right next to Dr. Sunanda Corrado, and we're going to be interviewing her about the Headley Amendment and the schools and a whole bunch of really heavy stuff. You know, last week we had youth advocate Andrea Nichols on the show, and he was excellent. And next week we're going to have Mark Blank and Mark Blank Sr., the Blanks.
Sinbad's.
Yeah, we're going to have the proprietors and owners of Sinbad's restaurant talking about that restaurant on the show. The following week, April the 6th, we're going to have DPS board member and congressional candidate Sherry Gay Dan-Yogo. The week after that, we're going to have Detroit author Jerwan Howard.
That's right.
And the week after that, we're going to have former city council member and also a candidate for Congress, Sharon McPhail. And the week after that, we're going to have Detroit author Char J. And I think the week after that, we're going to have Jeff Werby, but I still got to work that out. Okay, before we interview Attorney Tracy Peters, I have a couple statements I have to make. One of them is there is a domed sports arena that's going to be constructed in the City Council Attorney Letitia Johnson's district, a domed sports arena. Now, my being a former DPS sprinter who owes probably my life to the sport of track and field and DPS track programs, both at Northwestern High School and Denby High School, I want to see a competitive track built in that $12 million complex that is upcoming, that domed sports arena. And I'm going to be talking a lot about this. I'm not going to talk about it today, but I'm going to be talking about it on WCHB this coming Saturday, because we have got to get a track, an indoor track, for all the kids in the Detroit Public Schools and for Wayne State University to have its program. Of course, they have no men's program anymore. We got to get that men's program back at Wayne State University, because there are sprinters all over the city that are going to every school except Wayne State University. Back in the old days when I was running at Wayne State University, as I say, I owe my entire life to the sport of track and field. I really do. I went to Wayne State on a track scholarship. I was very, very fortunate to be on the U.S. national team and many other teams out of Detroit. Wayne State, Detroit Northwestern, Detroit Track Club. But we've got to get that program back, and we've got to get a competitive track built in that new complex. So I will be talking about that in depth. Okay, we have got Tracy Peters. I've captured her and brought her here. She's here on our show. Tracy, welcome to the John Telford Detroit Show on WJZZ Cool TV.
And if you recall, Tracy Peters was also one of our legal experts when we held a panel discussion on parochiate about the ongoing privatization of schools and the ongoing privatization of actually government services. And so I hope we go a little more in depth into what that means.
And Tracy, I gave you a Detroit native son because it's all about the right to literacy.
Yes.
I have an article on my usual Telford Telescope column here, but the cover story is Right to Literacy, written by the publisher of the Detroit native son. And this is an expose, let me tell you.
Okay.
I don't think some folks are going to be real happy when they see this, but it tells the truth.
All right. Well, if I may, I'll start with that idea of right to literacy. And
Okay.
good morning to both of you, and
Good
morning to all
You
listeners.
finally get to talk after all
Yeah,
this
no,
time.
I like to talk about something you're looking at that's relevant. To explain the work that I do, if you look at the right to literacy case, that was in the courts at about the same time a case that I've been working on very hard for the last 7 years is on. And the name of my case is TMCG versus state. What that stands for is Taxpayers for Michigan Constitutional Government versus State. And the reason I bring it up is because I am a school person. I'm a former teacher. I went to law school at night and became an attorney for that sole purpose, to stay in the practice of education and now the practice of law. Education is a highly policy-driven topic. I mean, it's when we want to affect change in education, you got to fight on two fronts. This is what Thurgood Marshall was always saying. So we have our right to literacy case, and that dealt with some of the direct, elementary, middle school reading policies, state law, things that parents can get a grasp of, kids can get a grasp of. What I made the choice to do is, because of public education's connection to public funding, I made a decision to get involved with the financing of it. so that anyone who wants to defeat our ideas on how quality schools could be run, they have to not just fight the policy that I felt the right to read was, even though that is a law case. I recognize that. But so often the negatives will be in the terms of finance law. And so I'm not a finance law background person, but the Headley Amendment, which is part of the Michigan Constitution, that ended up connecting me to charter schools. And if I may, I'd like to talk a little bit about that case and update the public on where the case is in the courts. Okay, so right now, and some of you know about this case because I've been talking about it in every group I go to for the last 6 years. The Headley Amendment is 9 sections in the Michigan Constitution. And we focused on, we being 2 other pro bono attorneys, John Moak and John Philo, we focused on Article 9, Section 30. And it's so short, I'm going to read to you and tell you what it is. Article 9, Section 30, well, I guess I'm not going to read it. I don't have it queued up. Article 9, Section 30 speaks to revenue sharing, constitutional revenue sharing. Out of all state revenues, 48.97% is supposed to go to local governments every year. This is since 1978, since the Headley Amendment was adopted. And local governments are counties, they are cities, they are school districts, they are townships, they are cities. Well, what the state of Michigan has been found doing, that's not worded very correctly, what the Michigan Supreme Court has held is that since 1978, and most particularly for charter schools since 1994 when they came about, the state has been in effect calling them local governments, just as the city of Detroit is a local government.
Which they ain't.
And thankfully we have the strongest court in the state, which is a Republican majority, I'll add, to say that they are not local governments. Right. Now, what the case did do, because those of you that are school people, and that's, really my audience, that a charter school can have a different type of authorizing body. And so what the Supreme Court came out on was those charter schools that are authorized by state public universities. Now, anyone living in Detroit knows that probably 80 to 85% of charter schools since 94 at any one given time are authorized by those schools. They aren't local at all. So, the common sense idea that a charter school is a local government, you can't just walk around and say, no, they're not. You have to prove it in court. And that's honestly been a big part of my life as a lawyer for the last 6 or 7 years.
So how much does this run against the head of other types of Supreme Court precedents that actually gave corporations individual identities and rights?
Are we talking about Michigan Supreme Court?
No, U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, they made corporations people.
Yeah.
They made them, in effect, they made them persons, which is, in my view, ridiculous. But
so it sounds like you're asking in a roundabout way about the Citizens United case?
Yes.
And other than knowing the broad holding of that case and corporations as citizens, I personally haven't done the research to think about it that way. The other reason is, and I'll be really frank with you, our case is still pending. When we won on that claim, we had 2 other claims too. Proposal A funds counted as a tax shift, and state trunk line roads was illegal inclusion under Headley, and also our funded mandates for things like the emergency manager's salary.
Remind us what Proposal A was.
Okay, so Proposal A, coincidentally or not, was adopted right around the time the first charter school was enacted in 1994. And if you remember, we used to fund our public schools through our local property taxes.
Yeah.
And I've read enough cases nationwide to know that there are challenges to that model. But in Michigan, right before Proposal A, 1992, 1993, there was a real scare about the way we fund our schools. And so Proposal A shifted the model from a property tax model to what's called the per pupil foundation amount. And right now, I think Proposal A is made up of about 6 things. The thing I talk most to people about with Proposal A is our sales tax. We had an increase from 4 cents to 6 cents. That 2 cents of the sales tax goes to Proposal A. And just as a point, can I make a tip for the average person out there who likes to challenge school things? When I go to other school board meetings in other districts where I'm not from, that 2 cents that I pay in tax, if I ever get challenged by the board who doesn't like my views, I always say, well, we have a statewide funding model now. Indirectly, my sales tax pays for what you choose to do with your schools. And it really, I think that's defensible. I mean, we went from a local model to a state.
So do you think it's broader accountability?
No. There is no accountability.
That's
Yeah.
right.
We have to ask for it. We have to define it, and
Because
we
my
have to demand
understanding
it.
about even how Proposal A came about was a manufactured crisis. The state, in fact, first defunded the whole school model, made it from what it was funding to 0%, right? And then came up with this funding model. And I just have to say, this happened with both parties, kind of working hand in hand. This isn't one side or the other, right? So in that sense, what about the public space for public education disappearing in Detroit? If public education is governed by a public space, and we're starting to see these public spaces for public education disappear, that even though this argument is soluble, how many urban public schools will be able to have it?
And when you say it, are you talking about like what would be a traditional school district?
Yeah.
That is a local government?
Right.
Okay.
So for instance, for school districts that have lost their public education systems, or school districts that are on the tip of losing their public education, where that space is being incurred upon by privatization, right? Those and more private schools are taking on this public service, and you're saying there's no accountability. How does this all intersect with revenue?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there.
That didn't make any sense, did it?
No, it did. Let me talk, because I'm a resident and I always want to know what other communities in the state are doing.
Can you
Yeah.
hold that thought just
Yeah.
for a second?
Yeah.
Commercial, honey.
And you have been watching the John Telford Detroit Show, coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Please like, share, subscribe, comment to us and other programs offered here on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And don't forget to grab your date and bring him or her to Detroit Vibes and Scribes. It's an artist showcase of musicians and poets. It's presented by WJZZ Cool TV. For information, please call or email. You can find us at the Hannon Center at 4750 Woodward every Friday, live streaming from 3 to 5. So please come check us out.
And remember to talk into the mic. I hope that they pick that
Are we
commercial up.
taped right now?
Huh? Oh, we're done.
Oh.
So you can, if you can collect your thought
Yeah,
again.
can we
you
get
were-
back to
Yeah.
I want to finish with Headley before
All right.
I answer all
yes.
those. Okay.
Absolutely. Headley. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, right now?
Yeah, right now. Right now.
Okay.
Right now.
All right, so-
What is Headley? What is Headley?
All right, so the Headley Amendment, much like Proposal A, was a bipartisan, at that time, 1978, commitment to keep local governments and state governments in check, right? Local governments wanted protections for their taxpayers. They wanted to be able to say to the state, your overtaxing is excessive. I mean, I'm kind of simplifying it, but it basically...
That's for autonomy. Local
Yeah,
autonomy.
what the amendment was to guarantee, especially Section 30 that we're working on, a dedicated stream of revenue to filter to local governments so that local governments could serve the taxpayers within their jurisdictions, which means boundaries.
So how is the current Headley lawsuit connected
Yeah.
to a teacher shortage in the legislature using public money for private schools?
Okay, perfect. And that's what I'm really here to talk about today, is just kind of how everything goes together. So you should know that I'm in that Headley suit because the state Supreme Court's ruling that charter schools are not local governments, that's big. That's big to us as teachers
You bet.
in the school world. But when you take a term like that and when you take a holding like that into a legal forum and say, well, under this constitutional law, what models the state is inventing, be it a charter school or, this upcoming ballot initiative in November to give tax credits or possibly scholarships to families so that they can attend public schools. What the connection is that this time, when we look at the Parochiate Amendment, because the last time was 1970, this time when voters look at it, they'll have another piece of information other than just fighting back and forth about the policy side of an amendment. And that's not a bad thing. listen, I practice civil rights law and finance, and I gravitate more towards civil rights and people, but to just make that argument in the state of Michigan, which I believe is very fiscally conservative, you're going to have trouble getting people to see why it's important to keep public dollars for public schools. So the connection is we're acknowledging that the state has been creating entities that are non-public and calling them local governments.
So would that imply that the 48.9% of revenues that come back to the local government don't have to go to charter schools in terms of the school budget?
I mean, with the holding,
local school budget?
yeah, we're going to have to see. And again, the case is still pending. There's not a settlement yet. What the Supreme Court asked us to do as lawyers is they said, yeah, state public universities, we know they're not local districts, but we want you to look at those that are authorized by ISDs, community colleges, and local school districts. There's only like 62 in the whole
You said
state.
there were two other issues that caused the case to still be pending.
No, the one is that I just named.
Okay.
And neither side is really clear on what the Supreme Court wants us to do, but we briefed that issue. And the other is a mandamus claim against the governor.
What is that?
Well, within our lawsuit, the Court of Appeals held that the state legislature had never issued the correct reports that accompany the Headley Amendment so that local governments could see the exact cost of funded mandates to them. Never. State admitted it. We didn't comply. But when the Supreme Court looked at the Court of Appeals decision, they didn't agree with the Court of Appeals. In other words, we won at the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court looked at it and they said, well, we're not really sure why the Court of Appeals didn't issue much of an opinion yet there. So we had to rebrief the mandamus issue. Mandamus means you have a legal right to this duty being performed. And see, the governor is supposed to, let me get the statute exactly right. When the governor and the executive branch write the budget, she is supposed to include a report with the legislature's role in the budget. She's supposed to not approve it, but she has a role in it. And the legal question is the governor subject to mandamus on this issue? So we're basically going back and forth saying yes and no. It's not connected to charter schools in any way. In terms of your question, Doctor, when the Court of Appeals tells us the case is over, which it may not be for another 6 years.
Wow.
I know.
That long?
Oh, yes. Well, the Headley cases, Durant and Adair, they're typically 15 to 20-year things.
So
we have to wait till it's over.
Happening in the meantime, like the DeVos petitions that are raising auxiliary tax refund funds, right?
Yeah.
There are two petitions, and you can get tax refunds for putting money in for private school scholarships, right? And how about the Republicans kind of crossing wires with Democrats, being eager about the child tax credits, right? But if the tax credits are applicable, again, to going to different schools, how is this mismatch of issues, as well as a lack of quality schools? I mean, there's a legal route, and you're saying the legal route is wrong, so what would be the political route to stave off until we meet it legally 20 years from now?
This talk show is the political route. I mean,
That's
I'm
right,
here, and really, when people see me on the street, and when they hear your guests, and they see us in our day-to-day context, how we were successful with the EAA in defeating that in Detroit is we staged a grassroots movement among just us, going to hearings in Lansing, but also networking with other communities in Michigan. So how you stave it off? Political. And this is what I always tell people when they're like, oh, I hate it, it's so political. Political is voting.
And Helen Moore, led that charge, man. I can remember she just kept doing it and kept doing it. And they finally said, okay, well, let's let her talk about it. And then she told them the scores. She said, how many people passed the reading test? How many of these?
Dr. Perdoni from Wayne State University.
Tom Pedroni was part of that too.
Yeah.
And you know how many people passed?
One. And that's why
immediately. Okay. And Helen Moore's trying to reach you, by the way. She says she'd been calling you, so return her call.
Well,
but
so,
anyway.
so you're talking about an attack on the revenue in terms of how they're shoring off our public spaces, on top of which it's like we can't even get the schools open and on their own until we clear this debt. So how do we deal with public school debt and these funding models too?
I want to answer
Because
your
we're talking
first question
before you
first,
talk
yeah.
about public school debt, I want to get this in because you mentioned
Yeah.
DeVos. You mentioned DeVos. And if someone asks you, and I'm telling listeners and watchers this right now, if someone asks you to sign a petition advancing two measures, the Michigan Student Opportunity Program Initiative and the Michigan Tax Credit for Student Opportunity Scholarship Contributions Initiative, don't sign it. Don't sign it. It is Betsy DeVos's thinly veiled scheme to advance the privatization of our public education. It's a thinly veiled voucher program which the people won't even get the chance to vote against.
That's right.
So don't sign that petition. Okay, I interrupted you, but I wanted to get that in.
Yeah.
Betsy DeVos is always up to some shit, let's face it.
And I can link your two. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Now, I can really link what you just said, Dr. Telford, and you, Doctor, about the campaign, and it's called for Let Michigan Kids Learn.
Yeah,
so
sounds
that's,
nice.
that's what, Let
Oh,
Michigan
yeah, I
Kids
wanted to
Learn.
ask you about
That's
that.
the
You know,
name. And the counter to that,
Well, what
Let
is
Michigan Kids Learn.
Let Michigan Kids Learn? What is that exactly?
right. So now here's the connection to Headley. And I would, as a
Yeah.
teacher, I would say it the way you did. If I want to connect to conservative voters that vote with their tax dollars, and that's maybe a label I shouldn't use, there are liberal voters that vote with tax dollars. Let Michigan Kids Learn is a citizen-driven ballot initiative designed to use state appropriations or tax credits to divert public monies to support self-governing private schools, often with few requirements or restrictions. Now that's
It totally blurs separation of church
carefully
and
thought
state.
out. Yeah, and what's interesting is in two cases, and I did talk about this at the Parochiate event in December, in two U.S. Supreme cases, one that's recently been decided and one that I think we're still waiting on a decision. Yeah, I lost my thought. It's First Amendment. Yep. The United States Supreme Court is looking at these amendments in a lot of states, and they are deciding on First Amendment grounds, specifically the free exercise of religion. If I could just kind of break that down.
That's one of the things
Yeah.
we talked about at the Yacht Club. Remember when we did that, when I hosted that thing on Procreate, where you were on the panel?
Yeah, that
I mean,
and
which battlefront are we going to fight on first? We got so many of them now. You know, I
Yeah.
can't keep them all.
But then also
Or numbering them.
sociologically speaking, religious identity is a growing identity amongst several minority communities, as well as the diverse religious communities from Muslim to Hindu to Taoist to Christian. So there are all kinds of conservative religious organized groups that are behind this as well, right?
Yeah.
And can kind of lead to education tribalism,
Yep.
the way my cousins experience it in India.
At all costs, we
So-
want to avoid what happened in Ireland, what happened in 17th century France, what happened. I mean, separation of church and state is absolutely essential to democracy, as far as I'm concerned. And I've been on this soapbook a lot of times, and we got Tracy here, who I know agrees with me. I want to talk a little bit more about Headley and how we can
Okay.
Yeah.
I will do that second. I want to
Oh,
give a
okay.
real clear guideline to separation of church and state
All right.
and
Oh,
how the
good.
United Supreme
Good,
Court
good.
defines that.
Okay.
Here's the rule, guys. And understand that this is politics, so you can turn words to mean whatever you want. The government may not directly support religious instruction.
Right.
This is our Parochiate Amendment. But it's well established that government is free to adopt policies that indirectly aid religious institutions, particularly through some sort of tax credit preference. And if you look
It's
at
always been.
yeah, and
I
so
think
Because
that's
we-
a dangerous way to
No,
let the
because
fox
we
into the
haven't
hen
had-
house, as far as I'm
we
concerned.
haven't had public schools in Detroit until the 1850s. So it was a lot of patronage and a lot of different types of activist societies that created private schools, church-based schools to educate people when there weren't any public school spaces. So when public education started, this was to prevent from these schools from being erased, the community schools that were already there. So it's still, you have to read into the historical significance of the meanings of the word at the time and kind of turn them on its head, right, in terms of
yeah,
context.
that's what we did for Headley. Yeah, and you're watching the court confirmation hearings hopefully this week of Judge Jackson. She's
Right.
talking a lot about judicial canons. And that's exactly what we used in the Headley suit, the rule of common understanding. And that when a constitutional amendment is adopted, the most powerful evidence to the meaning of that word, because our word is local government, is the meaning the people ascribe to it when that amendment was adopted.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that. Yeah, we can talk about Headley. We can talk about information about this vote that you all as listeners are eventually going to have to take in November. My goal is this. Public money to private school, we all have to make a decision on that. As you pointed out, Doctor, religious-minded individuals who want to see that carve-out, perhaps, in a private school, like this idea very much. Not just that. In districts that have annexed, where a completely, majority group has gone away because the state says we can't afford for you to have a school district anymore. And now these kids are in an all-white school district, and the kids are just not going anymore.
Displaced.
And dropping
They're
out.
Displaced population.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, and just kind of getting frustrated.
Private money not just going to go more to suburban schools anyway? Right? It's not just this laser focus on what's happening to urban, but this is a nationwide school reform where the wealthy will have more access to different funds again in different ways.
That's where I find a common ground in tax arguments. I'm not a state and municipal finance person, but when I had to start speaking that language to people about how what they pay for is hurting their perhaps other systems that they care about, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm for it because the people enshrined language in the Constitution. In fact, the Headley Amendment...
You're for what? Say it
I'm
again.
For using that argument. I'm a school person. I'm
Yeah.
a teacher. I love teaching. I would talk about schools and policy all day. But if I can't get what I want for a district, or if my building can't get what it wants by talking about great ideas, I have to go to the finance side of it. And I have to point out how, you know what? This hurts this when you pick that. People have to know that they have choices to make. And one criticism of not Proposal A, but the Parochiate Amendment, which was adopted in 1970, some people feel that we would have never had this prohibition about the funding because of the ballot campaign. I mean, and that's the part as a lawyer I gravitate toward, is because that becomes evidence in a court later.
That close
you
to
have
100
to
schools in Detroit
inform.
alone.
Yeah, you have to inform voters. So I'm here to inform. I know I'm not talking in a linear fashion today.
That's all right.
Education is not that way.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Education
Article
is
8, Section 2.
Education is always political. Access to education is always by blood. It's never been a simple, straightforward route.
Right.
It's never this cognitive idea of just going to school.
No.
Right? So then how are we going to foster autonomous community schools then? Because we have an immediate, urgent need of kids. We still have the school-to-prison pipeline that we don't even talk about after COVID.
And hold that thought, because we got another commercial coming.
And you have been watching the John Telford Detroit Show, coming to you live, streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share your comments with us and other programs that we offer here on this station. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And don't forget to meet up with us at Detroit Vibes and Scribes at the Hannon Center, 4750 Woodward, every Friday, live streaming from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. If you want to show up, please get tickets on Eventbrite. Tickets are free but limited. Thank you.
And don't forget to pick up a Detroit Native Sun, because they're on the stands now, and the cover story is Right to Literacy.
And with your Native Son, don't forget to pick up your copy of Life on the Run. Dr. Telford, please don't forget to give him a call.
Yeah, you got to call me to get that.
8272.
Yeah, you got to call me to get that book. And I've been selling it. I've been selling it by mail now. It's one of the ways I stay on the air. And I send the book to. I do it on the trust basis. I send the book out with an invoice, and everybody sends me a check then after they get the invoice. And I've almost never been stiffed in hundreds of times. I've said that's my best-selling book, believe it or not.
So what do we do with the crisis we have now? Right now, pre-COVID, the statistics were 110,000 young people without diplomas in Wayne County, 90,000 of which city of Detroit. I don't know what those statistics look like now. I don't know what our literacy rate looks like now.
Say those statistics again. What was that?
Pre-COVID, out of 110,000 young people who did not have diplomas, 90,000 came from Detroit alone. And that's a larger population that we have in schools.
That's because of the takeover.
For sure. But what I'm saying is these kids are going to prison right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So
or to the
so while
graveyard,
we're doing this
or on the
legal
dole.
stuff, what is
That's
the,
outrageous. I mean, say those statistics again. Say them again, one more time.
this is pre-COVID, 90,000, almost 90% of people who haven't been able to matriculate come from the city.
We got our work cut out for us.
Which is also
and while I'm at
correlated
it, let me quote
yeah.
Helen Moore again, and you'll see it in here too. The third grade reading scores
So
remain the worst in the country in Detroit.
We're at
We gotta fix that.
we got a great legal battle, but we're also at a human crisis.
Yeah.
So how do we get people to converge on it? I mean, what do we do to have autonomous schools? We obviously need our own capital if we're in public debt. So how do we go through this venomous slots of where to get money to do things for our own children when the fear is privatization, but it also seems to be the only viable option, and it's sold as something that you could do for yourself. But of course, charter schools haven't worked, right?
Yeah. I look at and you're asking, like, how do we? And I'm thinking, well, as a resident in Detroit, as a person that believes in good schools, and I'm not putting a parameter on that, there's a triage approach, which I think COVID has definitely brought in the forefront. And the way I approach it is I go to as many public forums as I'm able to go to. And primarily this is local governments that are cities and also school districts. Sometimes it's where I student taught. Sometimes it's where I have friends that have kids. And I make some of these same points. I unify.
But haven't they racialized the public forums? I'll give you an example. From 1994, as parents were reeling from all these losses, right? And meetings became invective. Didn't platforms like the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press actually exploit it into looking like we can't govern ourselves when it was actually not understanding where all the money was going and nobody being held accountable for it?
So when I say public forum, let me clear it up.
Yeah, because
I go to bodies that are subject to transparency laws, that are laying a record under the Open Meetings Act, where a legislative body has a duty to act, not necessarily based on my public comment, but for the community. Because this
is a
is
legal commitment to act.
yeah, and
legally.
this is why Helen was so effective,
A lot
and
of
this
times
is
they
why I
don't do
think
it.
we were so effective with the EAA. We are so powerful as voters. Why do you think voter suppression is like number one in this country? People that don't want you to vote against them know this. Look at all the voter suppression. So the triage is to go that people have no idea what you're saying. What? Oh, how dare what? Talk about this? So the triage approach is to keep moving all the time. It's really hard to develop approach until you have a unified goal.
Why do they call it triage?
Why they call it triage? Why? I'm thinking of a medical scenario.
Okay.
It's bandaging. There are three parts. Got to keep
and tell them
functioning.
to go to their doctor.
You keep moving. You keep moving. And what I found when I travel,
Using the Indian accent, yeah. She does
You,
that a lot. I like when you do that.
you pick up people along the way. This is how Russ Ballant was so successful.
Oh yeah.
I
my
mean,
man.
he traveled to
He's been
parts
on
of the
this show,
state where, we didn't know people, but he would go to school board meetings talking about PA 4 and PA 72, emergency manager law, and you get people. And that's how John Stewart, he's an attorney in, I think, Novi, he hosted a meeting for all of us just because of what was happening at public meetings. And we build our coalition that way.
See? Yeah.
Yeah, now the broader approach is hard. And see, this is what I think the majority groups always do is divide and conquer,
But
right?
go
They
back to
want
that
you
for 2 seconds.
Yeah,
because
sure.
As citizens, we want
was
to go
really
to public
successful.
meetings. We're not
Okay.
lawyers like you, and you said you
Go and talk.
created this group
Yeah.
because of what happens in public meetings.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about those observations? Because
Okay.
we still need to go, right?
Yeah.
We can't be dissuaded not to go. But could you tell us how they're trying to flip the forum on us so we can flip it back?
So I'm not experiencing the flip. That could be because I'm a white person. I don't know, because there are different rules for different people.
Membership rules.
Yeah, and I what it looks like in a community on the west side of the state that I've been going to, where the school district has been annexed to another one, is I just go and start talking at the mic at public comment, and everybody gets the same information. I don't have anything secret, because I wouldn't be being a very good lawyer if I got to the mic and hinted and said, "Oh, I can affect your tribunal." I don't do that. But I've picked up a number of parents from, and it's actually Marshall, it's Eaton Rapids, it's Parma, it's all these little tiny school districts where when you're teaching kids and you're running a district, you're really thinking about teaching them. Right. Hello, legislature. That's what we like. On governance from the educational professionals, that's why our test scores are dropping. So what it looks like is I'll stay after the meeting. I'll talk to people. We exchange emails. I get on their Facebook page. And I keep apprised of their issues to the extent that I am able to. I don't go talk as a lawyer.
Yeah, so that's more like a litmus experience for you.
I don't know. You're using a big word that I don't know from science.
As in looking at how public opinion is being expressed and how it's being taken in by the local government. To me, it's like an ethnographic approach, but again, you're coming at it as a lawyer. But like say if I wanted to be effective in my presence, right? You would say it's still good to go.
It's good because school districts have a commonality of issues. And what one board of education can represent to its constituents might not actually be what's happening in another part of Michigan. Yeah. This ballot initiative is a statewide constitutional amendment. This is going to affect all of us.
Because the school board meetings in the suburbs are eerie. They're very eerie. And it's like we think we're getting this great education, but really everybody's educational standards have dropped. Everybody's been losing schools. Mm-hmm. And when Grosse Pointe school system, only certain views can be expressed and accepted at the school board meeting, and it's just something that people know within that schooling culture. So,
which is why it's good to go outside your school district, because people in their own culture, in any culture, need shaken up. Yeah. And if you don't see it that way from a personal perspective, we're talking about the state constitution of Michigan. We're all going to have to follow this rule about sending public monies to private schools through education scholarships or tax credits. So whether we know what's going on in Grosse Pointe or it's not going to matter. But we're all going to be presented with the DeVos side, or however you want to frame it. We're all going to be presented with this issue. And I think it helps parents and people that live and vote to connect it to the schools in their neighborhood.
It is very dangerous to spend public money for private schools. I am sorry, I oppose it. No public money for private schools. If you want to send your child to a private school, be it Catholic or be it anything, pay for it yourself. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that again and again. Maybe I'm a lone minority voice, but I'm going to say it because I think it's very dangerous and it's not fair to the public at large to do that. Period. End of sentence. I guess I stopped the whole communication, but what were you about to ask?
I honestly, you need to help me thread back to what I was talking about again. But I feel like as a privileged parent who has a load of education that I don't have a voice in my school board. My school board is run by dark monies, is run by the people who send their kids to private schools. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that tax fund doesn't make sense. Now, if you look at the teachers' unions, I don't think the leadership necessarily expresses how teachers feel. When Detroit teachers wanted to strike, like what was it, a year or two ago, it was like a 92% vote to strike, and the union signed the contract anyway. Or how about the difference between the urban school unions and the suburban school unions, which are really just a lobbying group? I mean, I'm just trying to think about it in terms of just grounded civics, right? If you came into a 101 class, it'd be you go to the school board, you go to the teachers union, but these are vexed public spaces.
And see, what you're doing in a sense, and I know you're not doing this, but whenever we criticize a piece that goes with public education, we make an argument for people that think on such a simplistic level, like this let Michigan kids learn. All they care about is getting us to say, I hate critical race theory. I hate unions. Because, and that's why I'm here. I mean, we really have to come together and unify on. You will in November about this, and I
'Cause
share
I'm not
your
criticizing these
Yeah.
organs. I'm wondering if they've been somewhat privatized as well in terms of the lack of engagement I'm feeling that they might have with the ground. We need unions. We need
Yeah.
organizing, and I will never stop participating. But there's been something that's been happening with this new politics of image and these new generations and this whole thing. It's the public space is becoming very, very distorted, I think.
So
People get extra credit for protests now.
the good thing about a constitutional amendment is it brings it right back to us. We're the only ones that can adopt this.
Okay.
That's going to be very
Yeah.
powerful narrative against everything I just mentioned. And I think people need to you need to show up at every public meeting you can, get on that mic, remind the elected body that yes, they have discretion to limit your comments, but please consider the statistics and the demographics of your population before you do that. This is very powerful. And I know that my privilege lets me see speaking at a mic more powerful perhaps than a racial minority does, because it's always been the default standard for me. But I go to communities that are all white, where there's definitely minority viewpoints, probably along economic lines, and those people get up there and just say what they're saying. Because the recall, and maybe it's the size of the district, recalls are very popular right now if you're watching statewide school board things or city government. I mean, that's huge. That's something charter schools don't have.
So
Unions don't have.
How do we make these finance models part of the public discourse? CRT, that really displays the fundamental way that we do, because everybody's arguing for autonomy in schools, right?
Yeah.
That's finance. That's not CRT.
Yeah, that's when I do talk just finance. But you're right. One I'll tell you one subcommittee in Lansing that should be doing it is they've renamed it. It's the local government and something fiscal accountability subcommittee. I mean, I really think there should be more onus on our government to let us know about these issues. Our city council in Detroit, I've certainly talked to everybody on our city council for the last 5 years about the case. The Michigan Municipal League helps taxpayers. I mean, any kind of advocacy for, I'd even say police, fire. You know, local government services are affected by this Headley suit. And so sometimes the people that are those local government workers can do it too. I mean, in terms of formal channels, I haven't really thought. I mean, that's the part about being a lawyer with an active case. I can't really go out there and say like, hey, let's do an X, Y, and Z, because I'm still thinking about the legal arguments. But I know I'm a citizen. We have a website, you know, but it's all the material on our case, you know, and that's certainly open to the public.
What portion of Michigan education is rural, and how will that impact the pace of privatization throughout the state?
Yeah, I can only speak to what I've seen. I don't know what percentage is rural.
Sorry,
I know
that's an
in
unfair
the
question
districts.
that way.
No, the
Yeah.
districts that I've seen, everything between Marshall and Albion, which is about 12.9 miles. There's a heavy amount of families that come from farms or from towns that maybe have one school. And what I know in terms of impacting it is that if the families are happy with their elected leadership, and this is just my picture in this one region, there isn't an impact because there's still in place that relationship between the voter and the elected body. But I'm sure, and this happened with the Charter Commission, when you get into just reaching these individuals with things like broadband and transportation, that's a cost.
Yeah.
So the impact is different in a situation like that. I think this, and this is what I tell every school board I talk to as a member of the public. Do your job. Reach everybody. You know, teachers would never in a building have few parents come to a teacher conference and go, oh, well, you know, I guess I'll see them. Teachers, when parents don't show up to parent-teacher conferences, we are on that phone. We are at the house because we want our kids to succeed.
That's right.
And this is what I demand of every elected official. And I believe our voice is powerful. I think you should be telling your elected
On
officials
that note, we need another commercial.
Well, we
Let's
only
do-
have a few minutes left, so I mean, what are
do
some
the
final
third
thoughts?
commercial.
And
Do your third commercial.
after the commercial,
So this
I'll be
isn't
reading
live?
this directly.
Oh,
then.
this is live.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you're watching the John Telford Detroit Show, coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Please like, follow, share, and subscribe to us. And thank you for watching WJZZ, the coolest TV station in the world.
And on that note,
We're talking with Tracy Peters.
Tracy, what question should parents and the Michigan voters be asking themselves before they vote?
Okay. I thought really hard about this. Vouchers, and I'll use that term even though that may not be what Ms. DeVos and her group wants to have happen, have been used in the past after Brown versus Board of Education was decided to avoid integrated schools. I don't think that's where we're going here. I don't want to speak for her. But here's the questions. Number one.
I think it is.
If this passes and I want my kid to go to a private school and I get this opportunity scholarship, what's going to be the admission criteria?
Mm-hmm.
What private group of people? So I get a scholarship. Are the people going to
ed.
let me in? You know what's a really good indicator of that? Charter school lotteries.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I would, and again, this deserves more breaking down, but that's question number one. Will the private school have a lottery? What'll happen? Will I have to go to some private school 60 miles from my home? And again, it's not a public body here. You're not going to have any hold on the leaders of that private school. So you get money to go there. Okay, how's that going to happen? Will I be able to impact the people running the school? Like right now, in public schools, parents can review curriculum, and you better believe it, to bring up critical race theory again. In districts where that's controversial, and COVID, it was another topic. Parents are out in force. Okay, not doing that if a private school, or you may be able to show up, but can you really remove someone? And I'm not talking about big check writers. I'm talking about it, through a recall process. Is the school against my values?
That's why this is such a slippery slope, this whole thing with the public money to private education, man.
Well, and just, if I could just, the connection with charter schools to me is just huge, just because had been teaching ever since they've been around. When I look at and this is Southfield, a district I was in, when I look at the kids that really get in, that want to leave a public school, if there's not an opening, the law lets them not have that opening. You are so generously granted leeway when you set up a charter school. You could have 50 kids. I want just grades 2nd through 4th. I mean, you'll see the parade brought out for this voucher initiative, because it's all about choice. Same thing was done in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan, right? So,
we've been interviewing Tracy Peters, attorney extraordinaire, on the John Telford Show today. John Telford Detroit Show. WJZZ. Go ahead, Sunanda.
And to contact Dr. John Telford, please call 313-460-8272. That's 313-460-8272. Or at Dr. John Telford, EDD at AOL.com. That's Dr. John Telford at AOL.com. To sponsor or appear on the show, or to get signed copies of his book, which Hugh Perkins, Jeffrey Feiger, and Dr. Wayne Dyer all called spellbinding and sensational. It was the late, great Dr. Wayne Dyer who said, Dr. John Telford has a warrior's heart and a poet's soul. Read Dr. Telford's commentaries on the schools and other vital topics in the Telford Telescope column in the Detroit Native Sun newspaper, and also hear him on his other station, WCHB AM 1340, every Saturday morning at 9:30 and Monday evening at 6:30. And tune in again next Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock to the John Telford Detroit Show here on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Thank you.